I'm Mandy Yarkich from Creative Matters, and you're listening to Creative Matters on Air, where I have conversations with new and established artists from around New Zealand. I love to listen to artists' stories and learn about their creative process, and maybe you do too, which is why I've made this podcast, to inspire, inform and educate. I hope you can take away something positive and encouraging from each of these amazing stories to help you on your own creative journey. Welcome to Creative Matters episode 17. Thank you so much for listening. Today I've got a little bit of a winter cold, so please excuse the croaks. Today I'm talking to Arwen Flowers. Arwen is a New Zealand-born artist raised in the beautiful ranges, forests and beaches of the West Coast of Auckland. Her recent artwork on canvas utilises a unique mix of media: dressmaking patterns, graphite, charcoal, metallic foil and paint. Through this unique multimedia approach, Arwen references landscape and oceanic forms while exploring intersections, crossovers and parallels between historical and modern European and Pacific Island culture, and also themes of identity, often from a feminine perspective. Sourcing and using second-hand materials and creating poetry are part of her creative process and art-making ethos. The collages evolve naturally into combinations of craft and pattern, which reflect her historical European ancestry and the place of birth in the South Pacific. You can see her work on her blog, which is on our website, creativematters.co.nz, and you can check out her website, kiwiartist.com. Welcome to Creative Matters on Air, Arwen.
Hi, nice to be here. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, cold, but beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Thank you.
How's your week been?
Busy. Yes, always busy though. It's like a standard answer.
Yeah, most artists are.
Yeah. Juggling work, being a mum and trying to get some artwork done. Yeah, it's full on most of the time.
Yeah, I know the feeling. So let's just go back right to the beginning before we start talking about your practice and process. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us where you were born and something about your childhood?
I was born here in Auckland, but raised mostly in Waitakere.
Yeah.
My parents had a little patch there, not a farm or anything, just a suburban home, but it wasn't suburbia then, it was quite rural. So, I grew up around the mountains, the hills. Parents liked to take us for walks through the bush. But we had family out in Point Chevalier and Howick, so it was quite common to travel in the weekends across the northwestern motorway, which later on informs my work in a big way. Just that idea of travelling from one space to another, those transition moments, became a feature of my work. So, but yeah, me and my sister, my younger sister, who's a fabulous singer and lives in Australia, and my dad still lives in the original family home. And my mum lives in Warkworth. So, yeah, they're still around.
Cool. And was it a creative childhood?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My parents were really supportive. Mum herself was a massive example to me. She was always either painting oils, doing macrame, knitting dolls. And she was always encouraging us to play with usual Play-Doh and that kind of stuff. And I still remember going to play centre and doing all the fun crafts and things. And they were always my favourite things to do. Dad, I think, encouraged me in a sense of looking and being at things. If he noticed, he would teach me sort of observational skills, practical things, I guess, and how to be resourceful. I think that was one really important thing that he taught me. And also I think I've inherited Dad's sort of innate curiosity for learning. So I love researching, which is a big part of what I make and why I make it. So, yeah, good. And I think Mum always wanted to go to art school herself. Well, I know she did, but she didn't get the chance. So I think in a way, both my sister and I went to art school and we did our own independent things, but we were raised in a household that encouraged it all.
Valued it.
Music was another big part of it. Dad was really into music. Well, they both had interesting music taste. And so I was raised in a household that encompassed not just visual arts, but music and, anything really. They took us to the galleries, museum. We didn't have a lot of money, so it was anything that was sort of fairly affordable at the time.
But that's great, isn't it, to be so involved?
Yeah, being taught about the world around me by my parents because, they wanted to grow us into good, all-rounded, adults.
Aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so with your art, did you feel like you had talent, when you started high school and did you explore that side of things through high school?
Yeah, when I was young, I guess I was encouraged. I was told, hey, that's a great little drawing, So as a kid, I suppose you do what you feel you're good at doing because you're getting good feedback. So through primary school, I guess it started as early as that. I was, took my hand to trying to crochet and I was useless at knitting, but yeah, crochet was all right, making cards for the grandparents and things. And then I went into high school and was just mad to do art, did as many art subjects as I could. So, which included photography, painting, design, art history, and I wasn't allowed to do any more than that. So I had to be English and science with those ones.
Damn.
So I did as much as I could. And then I guess the next step was to go to art school. I went to Elam in Auckland.
And that was straight after school?
That was straight out of high school.
Wow.
And I just had this firm belief that it was the next step and it was what I wanted to do. I did really well with art at the end of high school, getting scholarship art, which was a help.
Yeah.
And once I got into art school, however, it was a different story, a completely different environment. And I was quite an introvert and quite quiet. And this was before the internet. So the idea of studying and physically moving from out of my flat to the art school space was a challenge in itself. And the idea of forming relationships with tutors and asking them questions was also a massive hurdle for me. Cultivating friendships with strange and new people was a massive hurdle. So I floundered quite a lot in that environment. I didn't really know what I was doing.
Well, you're still young, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot about, I suppose, finding out who you are as an artist, what art means to you, what you're trying to do with your art. And I was instinctively trying to do that, but wasn't aware of it and wasn't having enough conversations about it. I was sort of thrown into that mix where you're expected to do things, but you're not actually sure sometimes what those expectations are, trying to sort of unravel what's going on.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what kind of things were you doing?
Well, when I first got to art school, it's a general year. So, you try your hand at a bunch of different things, basically, I suppose, to try and gather a breadth of experience and work out where you want to go. I just knew I wanted to do painting, but I got so freaked out that I ended up choosing photography.
Really?
Which was curious in itself. I mean, I had always been interested in photography ever since my grandparents gave me this little camera, one of those ones where you flip the lid and look down, and it had these light leaks in it. So I'd take these fantastic little small photographs with the little rounded corners with pink and orange flares through some of the corners, which, I look back on some of those photos. I used to have some of them around, and they're just amazing little snapshots of my life as a child, my view of the world, which is quite sort of special in its own. But so when I did photography, it was all about the process. It was all about being in the darkroom. Well, one, because I was on my own and didn't have to face other people and take. I was never going to be a portrait photographer, or I suppose landscape was about the nearest I could get to a subject matter that wasn't too confrontational,
interactive with others.
Yeah. In the end, I just spent a lot of time in the darkroom. So I was taking photographs of gravestones and things, and then using the chemical process on the paper. I think the process was called chromoscedasis, the result, which is when you use the chemicals sort of incorrectly in a way, you end up with flares of the silver nitrate, or I think it would be the silver coming out across the paper and creating all sorts of interesting colour effects. Sometimes you'd get small rainbow hints in there. Most of the time it was sort of muted browns and ochre tones and things. But I loved the effect of that on the paper.
And that really does come back to your grandparents. The photography. That's
but
amazing.
it also feeds through my work over the next few decades, you know. All these things, these visual things that I really enjoyed, these subtle tones and hints, and also this interest in finding out what materials can do, sort of exploring, and not necessarily just, you need to know the tolerance in terms of archival tolerance, I suppose, with your materials, but you also want to know, I wanted to know where I could take things. But back then, at art school, I guess I wasn't really meeting the brief. I did flounder a lot. So I think after I did a year of photography or a couple of years of photography, I just wasn't being successful enough, and I wanted to transition to doing painting. And my mum went to bat for me because I don't think they were very impressed with my art making skills. And she sort of went into bat for me, and they took me back, and I did 2 years of painting after that. So my entire fine arts degree was, instead of 4 years, was 5.
Oh, wow.
But at the end of the day, and then I went back into painting, and then I ended up floundering there because I didn't know what I was trying to do with that either. I just knew that paint was something I understood.
It's quite hard, I think, at that age when you haven't sort of figured out, all the thoughts in your head. Just in life in general.
Yes.
It's quite hard, isn't it, to focus on something that you want to express through art.
It is, and especially when you feel like you're needing to do it within a certain time frame to certain briefs, and you have to prove your working process. I wasn't very good at keeping workbooks. My work was my process. I never really considered anything that I did to be a work in progress. It was, I just kept working on works that I finished, and so my exploration was through finished artworks, not really through little elements of play or, and
now
experiments.
With your practice, you obviously do a lot of research, and writing is connected to your painting.
Yeah, now it's completely different.
Yeah.
I wish I was the kind of artist I am now back then, but then the main lesson I have said before about going through art school was perseverance. What it taught me, because I wanted to give up halfway through, and I had heard stories about other well-known New Zealand artists who had given up art school as well. So I figured, there's no shame in it. In fact, maybe I'm joining this sort of great club of soon-to-be one day great artists who didn't complete art school. But what it did teach me was perseverance, and I cottoned on to this fact. It seemed a fact to me that to be a good artist really is about just keeping on doing it and getting better, because there are a lot of people who may give up or for one reason or another can't carry on or, choose to do something else instead. So part of it for me was just doing it. And that also means not thinking that I have to wait for inspiration, but just to start. However, when I left art school, due to my personal life, and because I was floundering at art school, it took me a couple more years really until I was into my mid-20s before I started to actually paint again on any regular basis. And that's when I started to do sort of surreal landscapes that were from my head, not from real life. And I would incorporate little quirky elements like lanterns or kind of symbolic elements into these landscapes.
All painting at that point?
All painting. I work in acrylic mainly. At that point, I found while I was quite impatient and it dried quickly, and so I could keep working and I could get paintings done a little quicker that way. And also oil seemed a little bit mysterious to me, and I wasn't 100% certain I could use it in the way you're supposed to. I also think as a kid I tried oil and it was just ended up being really brown and muddy because I was again too impatient and just kept mixing and layering, and it was just a disaster.
Yeah, so, you've got to wait.
Acrylic was my thing. So I was doing these landscapes, and I suppose over time I ran out of ideas in my head. I still liked the idea of the little symbolic items in there, that represented different things. But I don't know, it was running dry for me. So, yeah, I started to photograph the environment around me, and I was able to work
you
from
went back
those.
to the photography.
Yeah, the photography became a resource rather than a creative end. It was part of the process.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and always writing, always, I think a lot of creative people use poetry and writing as a way of processing what's going on inside and your thoughts and where you're heading. So that's always been sort of bubbling away in the background as well.
Yeah. So just going back to your mid-20s there, when you came out of high school, you started painting again after a few years. But what were you doing career-wise?
Well, I ended up being a graphic designer. I did do jobs through when I was at university. One of them was working in an art store, and that was on High Street. And one thing led to another, and I needed a job, and somebody said, hey, there's a screen printing company on the shore. Do you want to go interview for them? And I hadn't used a computer, I hadn't touched a computer, and this job was on a computer. So for some reason they took me on. I think they were looking for somebody who was creative to design tourist designs for T-shirts. And so, I convinced them that I must be the great person for the job. And they hired me, and I spent this really stressful 6 weeks just learning how to use Adobe Illustrator 5 back then and a computer.
Yeah.
So that was intense. But
good learning.
Yeah, that was my first serious sort of job, and ended up being a graphic designer since then. So it's sort of a way of earning a living that's consistent, and a lot of creative people can't solely rely on just what they make. Although I'd love to be a full-time artist, I need to have that regular income and be able to trust it. So for me, that's been the road that I've taken.
Yeah, and you've obviously had 3 children in amongst working as a graphic designer. And do you feel like the graphic design informs your art practice?
Absolutely. I think I've been quite fortunate because I'm the sort of personality that likes orderliness. And, I think I get that from my mum. She's a fantastic organiser. She's a teacher. And I come from a family of teachers. So, that structure sometimes gets in the way. But over the years, I've learned how to use it in a positive way and to understand its limitations for me and where it's useful.
What do you mean it gets in the way?
Well, I think sometimes I'd like to feel I'm more creative, more expressive, more spontaneous.
Experimental.
Yeah, I wish sometimes I didn't perhaps think so far ahead about how am I going to ship this work? How is it going to be hung on the wall? And think through all of those processes before I even start. Sometimes those practical things, how am I going to store this massive piece of artwork? It's sort of hindered me. Sometimes I've chosen not to make things because I haven't been able to work those things out. But on the flip side, it's actually been beneficial because in working those things out, it means that I've got confidence right to the very end that what I'm making, I can display it, I can get it out there. Somebody else can pick it up and hang it up. For me, that feels professional. It's like the professional side of my practice.
And if you're the kind of person who needs to have thought that through, it's probably going to help your actual art making.
At the end of the day, at the end of the day. Also, I've learned, 2 things. Being able to use a computer and being informed about how to use social media and that kind of thing means that I can self-market, which means I don't have to pay somebody to do it. So that's a bonus in itself. It sometimes, I suppose, means it's difficult to step outside and view myself like someone else would. So to write about myself, from the other side of the chair, it can be a bit difficult. But yeah, I think I do okay. I try.
Yeah, no, you've got a really good presence on social media.
Yeah, well, I think I've digressed. But anyway, let's carry on down here. So the Instagramming has actually become my workbook in many ways. It's visual, and I'd have to thank one of my friends for introducing it to me. It's highly visual, of course. It's a way of communicating with other people about why I do what I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I like about it is it's current, and it's a fantastic vehicle for communicating and hearing back in the now from people that are interested in my work, and other artists. Okay, they might not be interested in my work, but they're interested in being creative, and so you can, share stories with them and they can share stories with you. But a website is great. It's great to have your presence there, but it's quite static.
Yeah.
And I find this much more interactive and engaging. And I love flipping back even on my own feed, because I can check on some of the resources that I've posted. Like I post the pictures of doilies that I've found, materials that I've found, books that I've read. So it's inspiring for me to have a look back too when I'm just sort of,
Yeah, it's like a photo album, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I can sort of see where I've come, or sometimes practically I just need to remember what I called something, or the size of a work, and I can just flip through and look to where I posted about it. And
it's a great way of communicating, I think.
Yeah.
So let's just go back to your current practice, or even back a bit further to when you started painting in your mid-20s, and then sort of what happened from there. So from your landscapes that you're talking about, your surreal landscapes, where did you go from there?
I suppose I moved on to, there was one part of my work where I was doing quite vibrant urban-looking works, lots of pylons and telephone poles and things like that. And what I found was that I was absorbing this journey that I'd experienced as a kid from the Waitakares into the city and back again. It was a part of my world, sitting in the back of the car while my parents drove and watching these things pass by, staring out into space and looking at the sea and the horizon and Rangitoto in the background. And, and then suddenly you're up scenic drive and you've got the bush and, enclosing the vehicle. And I think my work started to reflect some of these things. I was becoming conscious of environmental concerns as well and wanted somehow to express that. So it was a way of communicating some ideas, and it was another way of working that didn't work out in the end for me. And so I've been through a number of phases, creative phases, trying to work out how to express myself, my art being a vehicle for communicating, for saying something, for presenting ideas, for discussion. And I would get frustrated if the work itself, the practice of putting it together, would get in the way of whatever story or idea was going on. And I also got frustrated if the way I was making artwork wasn't telling a story as well.
So at that time with the pylons, was it sort of realistic?
It's quite expressive work. Quite colourful. I was really enjoying how colours can ping, how they clash, how they move forwards and backwards in a composition. I tend to flatten my compositions out a lot. I've fought that all my life. Well, I have anyway. That I tend to flatten things out and work from a slightly more abstract perspective.
Why have you fought that, do you think?
Because I enjoy the way other people create work, which seems so real and alive. And so I felt somehow it was a lack on my part not to be able to do that easily. My work always had really strong horizon lines in it. It was just a composition thing I couldn't get away from. It was just really strong. And maybe it was because as a child I was always looking out into the distance and looking at the line of the hills. And
telling your story, isn't it?
Yeah, there's still something in it. But in the end, I moved from these abstract or colourful, strong, urban-looking artworks into tearing up the canvas, trying to create 3 dimension with the work, trying to create texture. Because acrylic for me was also quite flat. And I think with all these vibrant paint strokes, was trying to build up some sort of texture, something that was just, a bit chunky. So I ended up tearing up the collage pieces, which was a really cool period of time with my artwork. And, a number of people really enjoyed the way I was working. I got a lot of good feedback from it. But it became boring and laborious sitting there tearing up the pieces. And although it was a challenge at first to be either painting all the pieces individually and then assembling them and sort of trusting that I could do this jigsaw puzzle, or putting the pieces on the canvas and then painting over the top of it. I liked the way it broke the surface up. I liked the way it caused you to view the artwork in a way that was fractured, like you were looking through a stained glass window or imagining the erosion of a surface, and the canvas sort of became these different things. I did a whole series of work based on water. So I did a lot of research about water and its various states and what it did, and everything from water spouts in the ocean to the molecular structure of water, to the various states that you can find it in. And I, configured all of these abstract pieces of canvas in various ways to talk about that. There was one I did, which is quite a large painting, which I really enjoyed, and it was about koi fish being introduced into New Zealand waterways and how they muddied the water. So the artwork sort of had a skyline, and then it had this deep murky greens and browns underneath with these loose pieces of canvas that were twisted and were almost like reeds or kelp or something like that.
Sounds
And
beautiful.
I enjoyed kind of creating a limitation for myself by tearing the canvas apart, only to put it together in a way that worked for the subject I was trying to
so that was the ripped up canvas pieces on canvas.
On canvas,
and how were you attaching that?
Well, using really thick glue. Started to push the boundaries with it by allowing some of the canvas pieces to free fall outside of the canvas itself. I remembered I did a piece which was a secondhand frame, and then I allowed the canvas to drip out of the frame from the inside surface. Just sort of starting to think, what else can I do with the canvas? But then it became all about the canvas, and it became more difficult to sort of say something with it. It was all just getting difficult and annoying. Like the whole process was getting in the way of feeling spontaneously creative.
Yeah, but that's part of it, isn't it? Often with an artist's practice, you go through phases. Yeah. And sometimes you need to move on from a certain phase.
But I was starting to feel like, when am I going to find something that will stick? Because I'm aware that that's true for artists. You go through phases, but I've also felt that there's a pressure to find your personal style, something that people can recognize you by, so they can just look at that piece on the wall and go, I know who did that.
Yeah.
And I'm also aware commercially that, it feels like this to me anyway. If you've got a recognisable style and you've been working in that way, you are believable. People are more willing to invest their time maybe to promote you because they can trust what you're going to produce. So I felt perhaps by changing styles again, I was undoing some of that. Potentially. Yeah,
it's an interesting one, isn't it? The style and what you're sort of presenting to the world. I've just listened to a podcast by Lisa Congdon, who's I think she's a Canadian artist, and she talks about style. She's written a book about that too, actually, and just kind of retaining elements of what you do, whether it's colour or composition or texture or, use of space or subject matter is enough in her eyes, just holding on to something that sort of is like a thread through all of your work that you create.
That sounds really valid. I can relate to that.
Yeah, I related to that.
I think it's probably quite important to remember, so I don't get too down on the transitions and the shifts.
But the work that you're doing now is definitely, that's an Arwen flowers.
Yeah, you can tell. I think it's definitely got my sort of own stamp on it.
Yeah.
Which is partly why I'm really enjoying doing what I'm doing. And I've done it for about a couple of years now, and I don't have any inkling inside of myself that it's going to go away or change apart from only exploring it further.
Which is great, isn't it? So that's the place that you've been trying to get to for some time.
I mean, I'd explain it by saying it's got legs. I can work with it. It's yeah,
it's got longevity.
There's plenty of scope in there.
Yeah, definitely.
So just going back to the canvas and tearing it up, in the end I started putting the pieces onto the canvas and then started painting landscapes over the top. So it was like I was shifting back to what I was doing, and then I just got rid of the canvas pieces and started doing the landscape again, and was making a serious effort at trying to produce some work that I was really proud of. And I suppose in a way I was having a bit of a personal rebellion to this, what seemed to me people's enjoyment of realistic, almost photographic art. It seems to be very popular. Well, I know lots of kinds of art are popular, but this was my personal moment where I was thinking people are really into this kind of thing. And I don't make art for other people. I make it for myself, but I can't help but be influenced by what I think is good. And that's a big question. What is good art?
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to get into that.
We need another episode for
That's
that.
a whole other thing. But I was enjoying, I've always done landscapes, so I was thinking, okay, so over a few years I developed a personal style with making landscape paintings that I really enjoyed and I was proud of and I was good at. But it came back to the same scenario. What am I saying with this work? You know, I'm fine artist trained, and so it's not just about painting a painting that's attractive, or, okay, that's not always why you have to paint a painting, but for me, I wanted to paint work that was attractive, but I wanted it to have more depth to it than that.
More narrative?
Yeah. And also they were taking ages to do. And I don't have a lot of time to paint. I put aside as much time as I can. But if it's taking me 3 months to do a painting, it's not cutting it. I can't handle it. So I think I got to a point where I just needed to shift it again. And a few personal things went on, and I needed to play, and I stopped painting the landscapes. And I went back to looking at materials, and I suppose naturally, you know, I was looking at secondhand shops because they're fun to look at. And I'm trying to think. I had started to do things like print out on acetate, you know, with my printer, and cut out shapes and start to assemble them on paper, small scale, so that it was playful, didn't feel so intimidating, didn't feel so serious. And then from there, I created a body of work which was to do with navigating and exploration, which I suppose is a way of trying to find a sense of place as a New Zealander in this great Pacific space that I've grown up in here. And okay, I have to digress again, because I did a residency in 2016, and that was very much to do with exploration and navigation, and I completely switched materials there and did photography and printmaking.
Wow.
So that actually comes to play a part later with the collage that I started getting into.
Yeah.
But that little, I'll talk about that for a minute, that little, that space that I had that month was an amazing period of time for me to get away from the painting and to do something completely new. And I ended up doing a lot of research and choosing to do Van Dyke Brown photography process, which is an alternative way of producing images without using a camera. I was using a glass sheet and the chemical and using the sun to expose the paper, which produces a really rich brown colour. And I used the native foliage around me because the residency was in Piha, which is a really lovely place to be. And it was a beautiful environment up in amongst the old Putakawa trees. And
it's kind of returning to where you grew up.
Yeah,
almost.
yeah. And just having that experience of not having to work for a month and being able to create a routine of waking up, making artwork for the day, settling down for the evening.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like such a treat.
Just amazing.
And
really,
how did,
really
just
amazing.
going back on that, how did you get that? Did you apply for
I
it?
applied for it, yeah. I applied for it. It was a residency that was set up by Earthskin, which I don't think they are running here in Muriwai
Oh, that's still going.
Is
yeah.
it? Okay. I had a funny feeling they might not have been doing it, but if they're doing it, it's great. So it was, set up through that.
Okay.
And they had various, a couple of places around the North Island at least, I think, that they could ballot people out. But I ended up in Pihaso, which was good because I did have the children. They were small, and I did go back home periodically through the week to go and, get them off to school and see them for the evening and that kind of stuff. So just kind of keep the family thing going.
So that really sort of took you down another path.
Yeah, it did. So I've loved printmaking. My sister, as I mentioned, my sister did printmaking at art school, and some of my close friends at art school also did printmaking, and I loved the texture, the tone, the subtlety of it, which I found difficult to create in paint. I just couldn't do it in a way that I was ever happy with. So I ended up combining the two and using a gel plate, and I would use the ink on the gel plate and put the leaves on, create imprints, then take a print from that, and then I would also put the photography emulsion on top of the print once it was dry and expose it with the leaves so you could see through some areas to the colour underneath. And that was fantastic little process that I came about. But that was towards the latter half of the residency. The first half, I was actually making my own negatives and printing out various imagery, really, and composing them together, and then exposing the emulsion to my own made negatives, which was really cool, quite difficult.
Yeah, sounds interesting.
There were limitations with the materials, like I had to do several layers of the negative, and I had to print it out one way, print it out another way, cross them over, because the printer would have a bit of a dot line through it. So I needed to sort of negate that. Ended up painting on the negatives to stop, light getting through in some areas. And yeah, it's quite complex technically just to produce some of the images.
And it's quite experimental in that time.
And the whole thing was all about looking at why we collect from the environment. So I went to Auckland Museum, who were incredibly helpful, went and had a look at the natural history department there, looking at, taxidermy birds and bottled things, and things stuck with pins on trays. And yeah, fantastic, really, really interesting. Even a lot of botanical things that have been collected in Auckland's early life that have been stored there, looking at the breadth of our flora and fauna, and just really thinking about our connection to the environment and why we take things from it and keep it with us, like going to Rotorua when I was a kid and having those little glass vials with layers of sand. Why we go to the beach and pick up shells and stones,
driftwood.
Yeah, all that, and even keeping samples so that we keep a track of the species that we're losing, or what's going on there. So yeah, there's a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, and that sort of connects a lot with your sourcing materials from
that
secondhand shops.
Collecting sort of habit, I suppose.
And it's kind of honouring the past in some way.
Yeah. But it also got me thinking about the early explorers, and when they arrived at a new place and they would collect botanical specimens. And it wasn't always very glorious. Of course, they would be taken back and, used to make money, sold, and they weren't always very generous or kind in the way they took things. That led me to thinking about what it is to travel, to go to a new place, to be in a new environment, and how you'd see it. So I was writing quite a bit of poetry about that as well, from a feminine perspective too. The idea of being a woman on an island for the first time, sort of no matter how you get there, and what you'd make of it. And if you ever left, whether you'd tell people where you'd been or what you'd seen, and knowing that potentially people would arrive there and it would never be the same again. And yet that pressing need to share would exist, especially if you'd seen some spectacular new species of animal or insect or something.
Yeah.
So it was a magical time, really. And really, I think my artwork has grown as a result of that month and all the work that I put into preparing for it, and the work that came after. has been, that was a massive springboard, I suppose.
Yeah, which is amazing.
So my work has gone on to continue to have elements of ideas of collecting and exploration and being in this amazing space. So,
yeah. And it's it's obviously informed your practice, and to have that opportunity to sort of immerse yourself in yourself almost, and to develop your thoughts is such a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like often we don't have time.
No, well, that's it. The fact is we're often very busy, and, when you do have family life and you are working, it's sometimes difficult to string two thoughts together and be able to form that kind of coherent building of your practice. I think I've become quite adept at coming back to what I've been working on now. I mean, I've had to do it for so long. So, I'm used to it now, which means that if I've only got an hour to work, I work for an hour.
Yeah.
If I've got half an hour, sometimes I'll sit down for an hour. I think actually having limitations has caused me to work harder and more consistently than if I've got all the time in the world. Not that I don't want all the time in the world, I do. But when I know that I've only got a couple of hours in a week, then I'm more inclined to be prepped and to get into it and to make the work.
Do you think that's sort of a result of the kind of work you're making at the moment that allows for that? Or is it just your headspace mindset?
I'm thinking back across the different ways that I've worked. I think it's more of a headspace thing because I've worked in different media now. I've had the same approach. I've got down and I've painted, even if it's been an hour or 2 hours. I've got down and done some collage, even if I've only had an hour or two. And with the current way that I'm working in these materials, the same thing.
And do you have an actual set-up space?
I do. I've got a couple of different spaces, actually, all over the place. So I have them set up for different reasons and for different things. I'll go out to the garage to do some of the messy stuff. The more quiet sit-down stuff I can do inside. I've got another space outside of Auckland as well that I can do work there, and that's I'm currently sort of setting that up mainly for more of the collage. So I do have different places to work.
Sometimes that helps, doesn't it? If you can leave some stuff set up.
Yeah.
So are you ready to talk about your current work, or is there more that we can discuss? Because
I just talked about the residency and then head straight back into the collage because that's where I sort of left off with that one.
Yeah.
I was needing to process a few things, and so I was collecting materials, and I ended up, cutting out dressmaking patterns from the fronts. Like there's an example on your post on the blog there of the type of collage that I've been doing, and I noticed that the collages, and I did about 10 or 15 of them, were taking on a South Pacific feel. I was using shells and beads and little cutout bits of tapa cloth, figures, and I found these fantastic music manuscripts, and I was cutting out words from them in a sort of poetic way in order to title the work or express an idea. And they were fun and a bit sassy and kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit in a way that I would be too afraid to do on a one-off larger painting. So I could afford to be a little bit more playful and maybe say things I wouldn't normally feel I could say with a painting. And that, when I was looking back on the work, I realised, well, actually, this is looking at who am I, my identity, because I have struggled with feeling I can draw from culture around me, and yet I'm not very connected to my British heritage either, because I'm 4th, 5th generation New Zealander. So I feel very New Zealand. But what is that? It's very hard for me to kind of figure out. I don't know. Well, I guess I just felt like I wasn't allowed to draw from Māori or Pacific Island culture, and yet I'm immersed in it in a way without even trying. Although my parents are very encouraging. I remember taking books of, myths and legends out of the library when I was a kid and being really interested in, Maori story and
well, it is part of our heritage.
Yeah, going to the museum and seeing all sorts of artifacts and so I guess I started to think, well, perhaps that is what it is in a very simple way. It's me finding out and going on this journey of discovering who I am and amongst that, and telling my own stories in a way. I'm very careful because it's like nobody wants to offend anybody. I don't draw from the symbols and the cultural elements around me in my work because I'm trying to misrepresent or steal or any of that. It would really alarm me if somebody felt that I'd done that. For me, it's more about looking at the commonality between how we as humanity uses a lot of these different elements, the triangle, the spiral, the cross shape. A lot of these things are present across the world and for a long time since humanity's been making imagery. I like to think that I am telling my own stories, sometimes my own myths and legends, sometimes my own thoughts about what it is to be a woman in this place, or a person. I'm really interested in the idea of identity because it's so shifting now. Lots of people identify in different ways. I like to think that, well, I was raised by my parents who are incredibly non-judgmental. That was my feeling anyway. And I feel like I'd like to approach my artwork in a way that is all-encompassing and looking at common ground rather than looking at differences.
Yeah.
I mean, differences are attractive and exciting. It's what makes us unique. But also to remember there's a lot of common ground between people, even when it might not appear like that on the surface.
Absolutely. So can you actually describe your work, Arwen, for people who aren't familiar with it? How would you describe it?
I find it difficult, to be honest. It's abstract, and yet there's identifiable shapes in there. I did write something the other day that was going to explain it quite well, but I can't remember. Anyway, I think part of the process informs what it is. I mean, essentially, I use a painted background at the moment anyway, and I use dressmaking patterns, and I cut out the sheets of tissue following the lines of the pattern shapes, and I use those as a structure to create a composition. What fascinated me originally is I love the notion of space in tapa cloth or bark cloth, and how those spaces incorporate imagery and they break up the surface. And for me, the dressmaking patterns started to sort of do that. They broke up the surface of the canvas, and within each piece I could tell a part of a whole story, and I could use pattern and symbolism to do that. So sometimes I draw more realistic things like flax and houses and people, or bits and pieces, and sometimes I like to abstract that out into the symbols and create my own versions of symbols. I love looking through weather map symbology, cartography. All of those things play into the ideas of navigating, exploring, movement, the earth and the sky. And they represent all those different things, and they come together to talk about who we are, and the place that we're inhabiting.
And how do you take those, when you're cutting up these different things? Because you use doilies and other materials that you've sourced.
Yeah, so we've got the dressmaking patterns, and then I use the doilies, the embroidery, needlework, cross stitch, lace, and I take rubbings of those, and that for me is kind of addressing my love of printmaking with the way of capturing the surface. And there's this connection to the women that make these objects, which I love to include in my work. It feels like I'm drawing on some kind of history that is in my background. My granny did granny blankets, and the crocheting and the lace making. So what I noticed when I was using the doilies is how the patterns within them can start to look quite Pacific.
That's true.
There's shapes, triangles, diamonds, repetition that is sympathetic in the way they look. And I loved the combination, the way it was coming together. So in a way, the process became important, but worked sympathetically with what I was after in terms of the final artwork. And that's always been a big thing for me. I've always thought if you're going to make a piece of artwork, I've always asked the question sort of, well, how big should it be to best suit what you're trying to say? Or what materials should you use to best suit your final outcome? I think if you choose well, somebody who's looking at the artwork will get it.
It will make sense.
It will make sense. So that's been quite important to me to look carefully at my materials. And anyway, it's so delicious using all these different things. I love it. I
gorgeous.
love putting it all together. And each step and each part of making the artwork, I have to make decisions on where I'm going to put things and why I put them there. And
it's very much about composition, isn't it?
yeah, and there's a lot of spontaneous elements in there, as well as most of the time I have an overarching idea of where I'm heading. I've written a poem and I've had some ideas and I've done some research and I know what the artwork's going to be about. But then I come up against against the materials. Sometimes they're working with me, sometimes they're not. And it's from there that I move the pieces around and form the shapes to what I want. Currently, I'm working on a piece which is a bit more abstract than some of the previous ones. But that's because it's about reflection. It's another Matariki-inspired artwork, and I'm looking at the shapes of the, stars in the sky reflected in water. So, it means I've got similar shapes in the top as in the bottom, and similar kind of patterns at the top and at the bottom. But then trying to also make it interesting.
And sometimes do you end up sort of going down a different path than you expected when the materials are bringing unexpected surprises?
Yeah, and sometimes I deliberately do that. Occasionally I'll make a piece of work where I don't have an idea in mind. I like to do that. It's it feels kind of like a meditation. There's this lovely moment where I'm conscious of putting together things in a way that works, as well as allowing for spontaneous discovery, the way ink might flow, the way the paint, forms itself on the canvas. It's almost like being guided by the materials. They speak to me about what I'm supposed to do. So it's a conversation.
Yeah, I love that.
It's really nice. And I find it quite therapeutic when that happens. When I've planned the work and I know what it is that I'm meant to be doing, if I know it too much, it sort of starts to become a bit boring for me.
Tedious.
Yeah. So, what I was going to say about the dressmaking patterns is that I love the fact that they're quite fibrous. They're a tissue. They're like a skin. They're like a body in a way. We think about who we are, what we wear, how we present ourselves to the world, who we are inside of our own skin. So the dressmaking patterns have become quite an important part of talking about being human. And I can push that and pull it in different directions depending on what's in my head at the time.
So cool. And how do you apply the pattern?
The patterns are applied with a really thin layer of a type of glue, and it's a bit of a tricky process. I've learned to work with them.
Do you put down the glue first?
Yeah, you do. You have to do that. And then you've got to work pretty quick.
Really tricky because it's such a flimsy material.
Yeah, they are. They're pretty flimsy, but that's what makes them wonderful to use.
And they become quite translucent.
They are quite translucent. So there's various ways that I deal with that too, depending on what's going on in the background.
Do you do a lot of layering or not?
No. In the back of my mind, I've got ideas about some things I could do with the tissue pieces, some things I could experiment with, but I'm still happy working the way I'm working at the moment. Like, it's not static. There's things that I've got there in the background for the future, but I'm trying to build up a body of work. I'd love to have a show at some point. So, make a few pieces, sell a few pieces. I'm still trying to get the numbers up so that I can do that. So it's always just a battle of time and work.
Yeah.
But anyway, the materials themselves are fabulous. I use charcoal, graphite, and I use paint markers, which are perfect for what I do. And I also use gilding, which is an important part of the final work. And I see it as a way of referring to gilding on ceramics like plates and cups and, collectibles, treasures. And that's how I like it on the artwork. It's a way of highlighting areas and treasuring certain areas, and it forms an integral part of the composition, so that your eye will move around, and I can draw attention to certain parts. And it's a way of saying this work is special as well.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful to have that sort of reflective element.
Yeah. Painting is quite different at night too. A lot of people like looking at their work. I think it tells a completely different story sometime in different lights. And I find with the gilding, it does change the way the painting looks in certain lights. You capture things that you didn't see before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's gold leaf.
Yeah. I use gold leaf, silver, and then you need to varnish over the top, stop any oxidization, because I don't use pure gold leaf all the time. I just use what I can get. So.
And can you talk about your use of colour?
My use of colour at first was fairly neutral, and that was a reflection of looking at the decoration on bark cloth. And I think I liked the neutral colours. They were more calming, environmental related. However, I've pushed it a little bit into using reds, blues, and I'm really enjoying those. And there's probably more colour to come, but I don't want to do it for the sake of it. There's always a good reason as to why I choose the colours that I do. In fact, that's pretty much my practice. I think about what I'm applying and why I'm applying it. There's usually always some good reason.
And what sort of reasons? Is it emotional or physical?
Both. It depends, really. I mean, if the artwork is about something, and I have to think about, does this contribute to what this painting is about, really? And then in terms of materials, it's about the limitations. Can I work with this? Is it doing what I want it to do? Yeah. So I think in the future, I'd like to do really big work. I did quite a large work, which was almost 2 meters tall by about, just over 1.5 meters wide. And that was suspended off a rod. And I do have another one, which I can extend to about 4 meters long. And I'd love to do some panels on that. But it does come down to storage and getting the work displayed. And, I like to make work for myself. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to spend that long on a painting, where's it going? What's it doing? I don't know.
Yeah. But, having your own show would be amazing. And we were just talking earlier about finding your own space, which could be interesting, or, whether you're in a gallery or a community gallery or which way you take it. It's quite tricky to know, isn't it?
It is. And I find my work, because of the detail and the complexity with it, if it sits among a lot of other work, I think it gets lost. And I'd really love to see all of my work together in a nice clean space.
Yeah.
Where you can take it in.
And they complement each other so
they do.
beautifully.
I mean, I've got a couple of pieces hung up on my own wall at home, and I love it. They work well together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Something to aim for.
Yeah, I've just constantly got my eye out, my ear to the ground,
Yeah.
It has to be the right space and the right place. So, at some point.
So is there anything else you'd like to talk about with your practice or process?
Well, I don't know.
It's pretty well covered.
Yeah. It's just, keep growing it, keep trying new things.
So are you interested in extending your use of materials, do you think, or carrying on with what you have?
At the moment, I'm comfortable with what I've got, but there's never say never, that's what's exciting. I haven't anywhere near explored the materials I'm currently using to their full capacity. And I think that's the thing about scale. As you go bigger, you have to use things in different ways. So that's just a whole exploration in itself.
Techniques too.
Yeah, there's a couple of other surfaces that I've got in mind that I'll just keep in the back of my head for now, but that I'd like to try and continue pushing this whole Pacific crossover with European sort of cultural mix. We'll see where it goes.
Exciting. Can't wait to see where you take it. And it's so great, isn't it, that you found what you feel is where you need to be at the moment with your art?
Yeah. It feels very current for me. And that whole feeling of, is it getting boring or is it getting frustrating that I've had in the past? I just don't have it now. It feels really flexible, and I'm in charge of it most of the time rather than it being in charge of me, which is important because, I need to be able to produce what I want to produce and not find it too arduous. Otherwise, why would I want to do it? It's not fun ananymore.
Exactly.
You know?
It's just getting that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome. And it's such interesting, beautiful work.
Thank you.
And who are there artists out there? I think I can think of one that inspires you.
There's a few. I'm inspired by materials and ways of working more than artists, but I'd have to say John Pulle's work has been, I say his work is inspiring to me. It's different, of course, but inspiring, encouraging, I suppose. I can't explain how, except to say that as an artist, he not only makes artwork, but he writes poetry as well. So I find that inspirational, encourages me to think of my creative practice as a whole. And his work is so personal.
He's really telling stories.
Yeah, and I suppose in his work, for me, I saw those printmaking qualities sometimes too, the textures. And, he has his, looking at colonialism and its issues, and how he has seen that from a Niuean perspective.
And his travel from Niue, he's used his sort of journeys as a big part of his work, isn't it? Coming to New Zealand as a child. Yeah. So it's like one artist looking at another artist going, well, and connecting.
You have found your way of working, and that's fantastic, and it's encouraging to me. Although, we're two completely different people, clearly. I've drawn hope from it, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah, which is so great. And he doesn't use mixed media in the same way, but I think you can. I can see the inspiration, just in a very subtle way. Yeah,
I view his artwork as a kind of visual poetry, which I love. And he uses words in his work, which I've had this sort of love-hate relationship with for myself. I found it really difficult to know how to do it because I don't want to dictate in my work by words are so strong. They're so powerful. For me, I have to have a really good reason as to why I do it. And the few times I've tried it, it's felt clumsy and awful. So I think the nearest I've come to it has been the collages where I cut out the text in a poetic way in order to title the work or to say something.
And that works so well.
And I love the mix there. That seems to work really well.
Seems to fit. And it's not forced.
No, but I haven't incorporated words into my actual artwork apart from the fact that the patterns themselves have their numbers and their words, and I have played on those.
And using maps and I guess there's a little bit of language in those.
Yeah.
And, that might be something that comes through your exploration over the next few years. It would be interesting to see.
Yeah. I'll just briefly mention there's one work I did, Sailing the Matuaka, which was in 46, I think it was, the title. But that actually came from the dressmaking pattern itself. That was the number on the pattern, and I was curious. So I looked it up to see if there was anything interesting that happened in New Zealand on that date. And then it, found the story about this ship that had travelled.
Wow. How amazing. And it's so perfect for your practice.
Yeah, there's more about it on my website, so I won't go into it here. But just finding little stories like that.
And so that's sort of drawing inspiration from the materials you're using. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. And are you ever inspired by the land around you? I mean, obviously earlier you were with the Waitakaris. Is that still showing a presence in your work?
Oh, absolutely. The patterns become hills, valleys, waterfalls feature. They become bobbing islands in a vast ocean. It's always there, those geographical features and the sort of oceanic forms, waves and
Yeah. Very cool.
Always there. I think in a way it's a little bit like a set piece sometimes, a stage for the action. It's a sort of a grounding moment, the horizon line again,
that still appears.
A place in which life is carried out. Metaphor's always very strong for me in my work and always has been. In the rain and the clouds and the trees, I see references to humanity or myself in various aspects. So that's always there in some way.
Very interesting. So we are going to have to wrap up shortly, but I would love to know what you love most about what you do.
It's the spontaneity and the freshness. Each time I finish an artwork, I can't wait to get on to the next one. It's, for me, this work is an outpouring finally. It's a way of using media that I can explore ideas with, and that's what I've always wanted to be able to do. So, it all works together. It's synchronistic, I suppose. All of myself is in the artwork now rather than some kind of holding back. There's the fewest limitations I've experienced. So it feels like me. It's about the best I can say, really.
Yeah, and that's so fantastic, as an artist to get to that point.
Yeah, it's a real relief, actually.
Yeah. And to have that thought that, you've got so much more to say.
Yeah.
Is good.
Yeah.
And also, you get into second-hand shops.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's got to be good.
Treasures.
Yeah, it's a good excuse. Might try that myself, actually. All right. Well, thank you so much, Arwen. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I love your work. I hope to own one at some point. And it's really interesting to talk to a mixed media artist, I think. And for the listeners, it will be interesting because it sort of adds a whole new element, doesn't it? Having introducing different materials and making connections with that.
Yeah.
So so interesting to hear your story. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks.